I never thought my life would take such a strange and uncomfortable turn, but here I am, trying to make sense of it all. My name is Olivia, and what I'm about to share with you is something I've kept locked away for a long time. It's a story that changed everything for me, my marriage and how I view trust. It all started one evening when my husband, Ethan, invited his best friend, Benjamin, over for dinner. Ethan and Benjamin had been close for years, long before I even met my husband. They were like brothers, inseparable. In truth, I liked Benjamin. He was charming, funny, and had this way of making people feel at ease. But that night, something shifted in the dynamic. Ethan had been working long hours lately, and our marriage, while not in trouble, felt distant. We'd fallen into routines, barely speaking some nights because of how exhausted he was. Benjamin, however, was always around, always present, filling in the gaps Ethan couldn't. Maybe I should have seen it coming. Maybe the warning signs were there, and I ignored them. But I trusted Benjamin. I trusted him completely. That evening, after dinner, Ethan got a call from work, another emergency. He had to leave for a few hours, which wasn't unusual. Benjamin stayed behind to help me clean up, chatting away like nothing was out of the ordinary. But as we stood side by side washing dishes in the kitchen, I noticed the way he looked at me had changed. There was something in his eyes, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. At first I brushed it off. Maybe I was just imagining things. After all, we were friends. We'd shared countless dinners and laughed over stories, and there was never anything inappropriate. But that night felt different. As I was finishing up, I realized I hadn't grabbed a towel from the bathroom, and since Ethan wasn't around to help me, I excused myself to get one. It should have been a simple task, just in and out, but as I stepped into the bathroom and turned on the shower to warm up the water for my usual nighttime routine, something unexpected happened. I heard footsteps behind me, and before I could even register what was going on, Benjamin was there, standing in the doorway of the bathroom. My heart raced. There was no reason for him to be there. I had closed the door, or at least I thought I had, but there he was, watching me with this strange expression on his face. "Olivia," he said, his voice low and calm. "We need to talk." A shiver ran down my spine. I wasn't sure if it was the cool air from the corridor or the sudden tension that had filled the room. "What is it, Benjamin?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my mind was racing with questions. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, closing the bathroom door behind him. My heart pounded in my chest, and suddenly the warmth of the shower felt suffocating. I backed up against the counter, not sure what was happening, but feeling that whatever it wasn't good. "I've been thinking," he began, his eyes meeting mine. "About us." "Us?" I echoed, confused and worried. "What do you mean, us?" "Benjamin, you're Ethan's best friend. There is no us." But the way he looked at me told a different story. He wasn't backing down, and the tension between us was thick, too thick to ignore. My mind ran through every possible scenario. Was I misinterpreting this? Was he going through something I didn't know about? Or worse, had I somehow given him the wrong impression? I felt trapped. He was blocking the only exit, and although nothing had happened yet, the situation felt like it was spinning out of control. "Benjamin," I said, my voice a little sharper this time, "I think you should leave." But instead of walking away, he took another step closer. "Olivia," he whispered, his tone almost pleading. "You know there's something between us. I see the way you look at me when Ethan's not around. You can't deny it." My stomach was in knots. This wasn't happening. I had never thought of him that way, not once. Sure, we'd had fun together, we'd laughed and told stories, but it was all innocent. I loved my husband, and Benjamin was nothing more than his friend, our friend. "You've got it all wrong," I said firmly, trying to sound confident even though my hands were shaking. "Whatever you think is happening, it's not. I love Ethan." Benjamin's eyes darkened, and for a moment I saw a side of him I had never seen before. It wasn't anger exactly, but frustration, maybe even despair. He reached out and took my arm, gently but firmly, as if trying to make me see things his way. "We don't have to pretend, Olivia," he murmured. "I know you feel it too." I pulled my arm away, my heart racing faster than ever. "Stop," I said, my voice shaking now. "This isn't right." For a split second, I saw the realization flash across his face, that what he was doing was crossing a line. But instead of backing down, he hesitated, then slowly nodded and stepped back. "You're right," he finally said, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me." I stood there, frozen, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to shout at him, kick him out of the house and never see him again. But another part of me, a quieter part, felt a strange mixture of sadness and confusion. How had we ended up here? And more importantly, what was I going to do? When Benjamin finally left the bathroom, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But as I stood there, still shaking from the encounter, I knew that things could never be the same again. Ethan would be coming home in a few hours, completely unaware of what had almost happened, and I was left with the question, should I tell him, or should I keep this moment buried and pretend that nothing had changed? I stood there staring at the closed door for what seemed like an eternity. The sound of the shower continued to echo around me, but my mind was somewhere else. What had just happened felt like a dream, a bizarre, disturbing dream that I wanted to wake up from. Benjamin was gone now, and I was alone with my thoughts. My heart was still pounding, my breathing was shallow, and as much as I tried to calm down, the weight of what had just happened was pressing down on me, making it hard to think clearly. I turned off the shower and sat down on the edge of the bath, trying to process everything. Should I tell Ethan? The question played over and over in my mind. Part of me wanted to be honest, tell him everything and let him decide how to deal with it. But another part of me, the part that feared the consequences, told me to keep quiet. After all, nothing had really happened, had it? Benjamin hadn't physically done anything, but that didn't change the fact that he'd crossed a line I couldn't ignore. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. Ethan was home. My heart leapt in my chest, and I immediately felt a surge of anxiety. What was I going to say to him? Could I even look him in the eye, knowing what had almost happened? I took a deep breath and tried to collect my thoughts as I walked out of the bathroom. "Hey, babe," Ethan called as he walked into the living room, leaving his work bag by the door. He looked exhausted, the way he always did after a long shift. His eyes met mine and I forced a smile, even though I felt like I was going to fall apart inside. "Hey," I replied, my voice a little shaky. I hoped he wouldn't notice. He came over and kissed me on the forehead, his usual affectionate gesture. "Are you all right?" he asked, sensing something was wrong. I hesitated for a moment, searching his face for any sign that he already knew. But of course he didn't. How could he? I was the only one who knew what had happened in that bathroom, and for a moment I thought about telling him, about letting it all out. But then, something stopped me. "Yeah," I finally said, forcing myself to act normal. "I'm just tired. It's been a long day." Ethan nodded, accepting my answer without question. He was too tired to probe further, which was a relief. "I understand," he said with a sigh. "Work has been insane. I'm sorry I had to leave you with Benjamin tonight." The mention of Benjamin's name made my stomach churn again. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I felt a surge of anger. Anger at Benjamin for putting me in this position, and anger at myself for not knowing how to handle it. Should I have been more forceful? Should I have told him to leave earlier? The questions swirled in my head, but none of them had easy answers. Ethan sat down on the sofa and rubbed his temples. "I'm going to take a quick shower and then go to bed. Is that all right with you?" I nodded quickly, not wanting to be alone with my thoughts. "Yeah, sure. I'll be here." As he disappeared into the bathroom, the same bathroom where everything had happened just minutes before, I felt a wave of nausea. I wanted to run in and stop him, to tell him the truth before it was too late. But I didn't. Instead, I sat on the couch, feeling like a stranger in my own home, not knowing what to do next. The days passed and life returned to its usual rhythm, or so it seemed on the surface. Ethan went to work, we had our dinners together, and everything seemed normal. But deep down, I knew something had changed. Every time I saw Benjamin's name on Ethan's phone, I felt a knot in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, like a storm brewing just below the surface. Benjamin hadn't contacted me since that night, which was a relief, but it also left me wondering, did he regret what he'd done, or was he waiting for the right moment to try again? I didn't know, and the uncertainty ate away at me. A week later, Ethan invited Benjamin over to our house for a casual get-together. I panicked the moment I heard the invitation. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Yeah, why not?" Ethan replied, completely oblivious to my discomfort. "He's been really busy with work, and I haven't seen him since that dinner. It'll be good to catch up." I wanted to shout, to tell him that I didn't want Benjamin anywhere near our house, but I couldn't. If I said anything, Ethan would know something was wrong, and I wasn't ready to have that conversation. So I remained silent, forcing a smile and nodding in agreement. The day of Benjamin's visit, I felt like I was on edge the whole time. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't relax. Every sound made me jump, and the minutes seemed to fly by as I waited for him to arrive. When Benjamin finally appeared, everything felt different. His usual charm was still there, but it felt forced. There was a tension in the air, one that only I could feel. Ethan, as usual, was completely oblivious, laughing and joking with his friend as if nothing had changed. But I could sense the change, the unease lurking just below the surface. As the evening wore on, I found myself avoiding eye contact with Benjamin, keeping my distance whenever possible. I didn't want to give him the opportunity to misinterpret my actions, to think that what had happened in the bathroom was somehow acceptable. But the more I tried to avoid him, the more awkward things became. At one point, Ethan excused himself to take a phone call, leaving Benjamin and me alone in the living room. My heart raced as the door clicked shut behind him, and for a brief moment, the silence between us was deafening. Benjamin cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Olivia," he began, his voice low, "about what happened that night." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. "I don't know what I was thinking," he continued, his eyes filled with guilt. "I screwed up. I crossed a line, and I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved to hear him admit it, but another part of me was still angry, still hurt. "Benjamin," I said softly, my voice shaking, "you put me in a very difficult position. I trusted you." He nodded and looked down at his hands. "I know, and I regret it. I really do. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted to apologize." For a moment, the tension between us hung in the air, thick and suffocating. But then, as quickly as it had come, it was gone. I didn't say another word, and neither did he. When Ethan came back into the room, everything was back to normal, or so it seemed. But the truth was, nothing would ever be the same again.